Hi guys, welcome to Full Time Devils. This is the huge player of the season debate. Yes, I am joined by this man, Stephen Howson, back from, where did you go?
Sophia.
Oh, that's nice. All right, moving on. Anyway, Jay's also here, and Paul from United Rantcast, and I was going to say red flag flying high, but that is definitely Jay.
That's Jay.
Yeah, Paul does Bleacher Report and all that good stuff. Cheeky plugs there, so go and check those out. But anyway, today we are doing a huge player of the season debate. I'm going to give these guys the opportunity to give their nomination and give their arguments for why that player should be United's player of the season. And then I'm going to go crazy with power and pick a winner. I can't wait for this. So basically, yeah, I could pick the winner, can't I? So I probably have it in my mind.
You've already told me I'm not winning.
It's that time of year where the Sir Matt Busby Player of the Year award is handed out. But you know what's more prestigious than that, right?
Full-time Devils Player
The
of the Year award.
FTDs. Yes. You've had a few of them in your time, ain't you?
Mm-hmm.
All right then, moving on. We are going to, Jay, you get the floor first. And we want you to give your Player of the Year nomination and the reasons why.
Well, I never thought I'd say this about a year ago. If you asked me a year ago who I thought next season's Player of the Year award would be, it definitely wouldn't be this player. But I'm going to go with Tony Valencia.
Ooh.
I think he's been outstanding this season, and I was never his biggest fan. Beginning of the season, me and Alston had a bit of a debate looking forward towards the season. I said that Valencia started showing signs that he could be the player we all hoped he was and saw glimpses of back in the day. But obviously, as a winger, he'd moved back to right back, and we still didn't know whether he could do a job there. But I think he's been outstanding all season. I really do. I think he's got rid of the silly mistakes that used to sort of blight his time at right back. He used to switch off a lot, especially at set pieces. He stopped doing that. He's still getting forward. Yes, his crossing still leaves a little bit to be desired. But if you look down our right-hand side, he just bosses it. He bosses United's right-hand side. It's almost like he doesn't need a winger at times. He does it all on his own. And I think if you're looking for consistency, some of the other players you might mention, I don't know who Paul, and I don't know who he's going to mention, but Howson's going to mention. But I think in terms of consistency, like 7 or 8 out of 10 every game, I think it's got to be Valencia. You know, he just does it every game. And I think not many players have done it every game. You know, you look at his last hands, whoever, they'll turn it on one game, maybe not the next. But for me, every game he's been outstanding. And I think when you look at the points we've dropped, you can't blame him for it. He's one of the few players that every week when he leaves the pitch, you think he's done himself justice when maybe some of his teammates haven't. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Tony V.
It is crazy the rise he's made and the fact that he's still at the club, isn't it? Like, because I think he's done so much better this season as well, because when he wasn't a winger and he was expected to get goals and assists, he had that pressure on him. With him as a fullback, he can still play his game. He hasn't got the pressure of him getting goals, getting assists. Defensively, he's improved, like you say, and he's come on great for it. And he still looks like he's got a good few years under his belt as well. And what have you made of Tony V this season?
Yeah, he has got a few years left in him. He's in phenomenal shape, for one. He's just so down to earth and so honest in how he plays the game. He will literally give you everything. He might be the South American equivalent of Dennis Irwin, because he's not necessarily doing the spectacular, but he's always there, isn't it? And I think he's one of the hardest players at the club as well. Like, if you're just pure toughness, and I think you need that. And I think one of the good things that we've had this season is the fact that Valencia has been able to just been consistently played. I think United need more players that when they're fit, they play. Valencia is one of those, Zlatan's one of those, Pogba's one of those, De Gea's one of those, but there's not enough of those in the team. There's a lot of people where you go, maybe Mata, maybe Mkhitaryan, maybe Marshall, maybe this guy. And I think the more players that you've got, when they're fit, they own a position, the better the team's going to be. Tony Valencia has been fantastic this season. And the worries that we had from him last season about converting to right back, whatever Jose Mourinho and the training staff have done with him this season has eradicated most of that. I think there's still a little bit where he's a little too overcautious with the ball in the final third, but he's certainly better than he was last year.
Paul, what have you made of Tony V? I love as well this season how we won the EFL Cup. Next day, he's on that treadmill. Like, what a man. You just, like, have a rest, Tony. Why are you still running?
He's a beast.
I mean, to be fair, I would take the choice between should we play Mkhitaryan or Mata over we're definitely going to play Tony Valencia. But he has had a really good season. He was the player that you got in there first, Jay, because I think if I'd had the whole squad to pick from, he's probably the player that I would have made the argument for, exactly for the reason that you said, which is consistency. The reason why I'm going to make the argument for the player I am in a bit is about the highs. which Valencia hasn't. There haven't been too many games this season where you think Antonio Valencia was absolutely outstanding today. Maybe one or two. He's just hitting a general level of competence. I mean, I was just looking at some of the numbers because I think it's kind of interesting to see how they stack up against what you think. And like, obviously, he has a kind of extremely important role in building our attack. He's making over one key pass per 90 minutes of football, which means he's creating a chance every time he plays 90 minutes, and basically plays 90 minutes every time he plays. His crossing, in my mind, it would have been worse. These numbers would have been worse, but he's hitting 1.6 accurate crosses per game in the league, which is like quite a big number, because you tend to think that even though he's had a much improved season, there's still that last bit that isn't there, not necessarily in terms of conservatism, but in terms of quality. I think the very best players in the world, you could upgrade on Valencia with an improvement in the final third, but I think defensively he's been excellent. In terms of one man to maraud the entire flank, he's been absolutely superb. And yeah, nobody would have had thought he'd be two people's pick for player of the season. I don't know how many of us would even thought he'd still definitely be at the club at this point.
I get what you're saying, Paul, about him maybe not being amazingly outstanding in some games, but he's a right back, and I think a lot of the time, if a right back's doing a good job for large parts of the game, you might not even notice him. Do you know what I mean? When we're defending, and I think he might not reach the heights of other players, but he's been completely consistent, and he has had the odd game where he's actually stood out, where you thought, tell you what, Valencia's quality today.
Is it a worry if, like Jose Mourinho said, it'd be a worry if David De Gea was our player of the year again? Is it a worry if our player of the year is a defender?
I feel like...
Well, Gabby Hines has won it, and I think Evra's won it as well when we've not had vintage seasons.
Yeah, that was a dark season when Hines won it, wasn't it? 2005.
But he was worthy of it. He was worthy of it.
Yeah.
It's an upgrade, isn't it? Defender's an improvement on the goalkeeper.
Valencia's already won it, by the way.
Yeah, he was not a defender then, though.
Yeah, he wasn't.
And also,
look at the merry-go-round as well at left back and all the problems we've got there. It's just such a relief to know your right back sorted. It'd be great if we could do the same for left back, because at the moment it's either Ashley Young or it's Damian, or there's still a question mark about Luke Shaw, which we'll go into. And I just think it's just one of those where your right back is sorted. You've got a right back you can rely on. I think Jose Mourinho a few months ago said he was the best right back in the world, or something equally as dramatic. But the fact that he's even saying that shows you how well he's come on. Because if you'd have said that a year ago, people would have sectioned you. Would have thought you'd gone mental. But you can have that debate, you can have that argument of how many right backs out there are better than him, and I can't think of many.
I think it's also really worth saying that it's absolutely awesome for him that he's done this. Like, it's an absolutely wonderful turn of events that he's built his confidence from scratch again. And he looked like he'd lost so much since that season he won Player of the Year. We never thought we'd see this Valencia again, let alone this Valencia playing at right back. It's been really lovely to see.
And it's a great sign that every manager plays him as well. And it's like, I know people I've got on Valencia's back in the past as well when he's been poor, but Jose Mourinho has continued to pick the people like Valencia because he will do what his manager tells him to do. He's ultimately there, a proper team player, and it doesn't matter if he's not playing at right wing and he wants to play it further upfield. He's playing at right back, he's doing his job, and he's going about it fantastically well. So that was Jay's choice for player of the year. Paul, your chance to take the floor.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if many people would have thought that this would end up being a controversial pick when the season started. It seemed like maybe it would be a bit of a no-brainer, but I think in the end it probably is not going to be too many people's choice. And actually, like I said, it was my second choice because Valencia's consistency would have nudged it for me. I think Valencia's, apart from De Gea, who definitely can't win it this season, apart from De Gea, Valencia's basically been the only truly consistent performer in the squad. Maybe you could say Ander Herrera.
You are supposed to be arguing against Valencia, by the way.
I am. I'm about to. Ander Herrera is maybe the other player that you'd say has been consistent, but a player that hasn't been consistent, but has been one of the best reasons to watch United, and has been good almost every single time United's been good this season, is Paul Pogba. Now, Pogba's been a disappointment to a lot of people this season, and understandably so. And I can think of a lot of reasons to criticise some of his performances at certain key moments. But there's two things I keep coming back to. One, our best run of the season, where we won game after game after game after game, from like Zorya Luhansk to Hull City away. I think that was the run.
Big teams in the world.
No, I mean,
mouth-watering clashes those.
We beat Zorya, and that started a winning run, which took us all the way up to when we just gave up in the semi-final, the second leg of the semi-final, when we'd already won. So during that unbeaten run, Paul Pogba was man of the match almost every game during that run. Like he just hit a real purple patch of form. He was creating a ton of chances. We were playing with a 3-man midfield, which clearly got the best out of him. And that for that spell, it was awesome. And then I think back to the last 20 minutes of the League Cup final. A lot of people have criticised Pogba's performance in that game, and I think this is so revisionist. If he hadn't cost £89 million, and if he wasn't visually striking in the centre of the park and kind of like this kind of flamboyant character, people would have a very different take on his performance that day. Because in the last 20 minutes, he took over that game. He started running it. There's no Ibrahimovic winner if Pogba doesn't kind of kick into his top gear in the last 20 minutes of that game. But I'm not just talking about that. I'm also talking about the game against Southampton right at the beginning of the season where he just lit the place up. His goal against Swansea. He's the most creative midfielder in our side. He's making 2 key passes per game. And his assist numbers would be so much higher than they are at the moment if Ibrahimovic had been able to take more of the chances that Pogba stuck on an absolute plate for him. I think... Listen, I'm not going to lie. This is a slightly hot take choice. I don't think he's going to win this award. But I think next season there's absolutely every chance he will. And I do think on the merits of his performance, if you strip out expectations and all that kind of stuff and you kind of do a bit of an algorithm to flatten out the highs and lows, I reckon Pogba's kind of average rating is probably about as high as Antonio Valencia's average rating. It's just not as consistent. It's been achieved with more peaks and troughs. That's my take anyway.
Both Who Scored and Squawka have Paul Pogba as our best player of the season. And stats-wise, what he's achieved in terms of...
Team of the Year, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, hang on. In terms of what he's done in terms of passing in the final third, chances created, interceptions, dribbles, all that sort of stuff is better than when he was in the FIFA Pro World 11 last year at Juventus. So Paul's right, exactly. The expectation placed on Pogba is massively unfair because he's delivering more than when he delivered and was considered one of the best midfielders in the world last year. The problem is all of the opposition fans, everyone who hates United, which is basically everyone who watches football except for United fans in England, want the narrative to be that he's been a flop because he's not scored 50 goals. But he is having a good season. And I think as a little bit of a way of mitigation, do you remember when Ronaldo didn't deliver in the big games? Do you remember when Ronaldo was not really the man in all the biggest games? And that was, they would always say, flat track bully, doesn't do it in the big games and stuff like that. And that's been levelled at Pogba, and I think fairly levelled at Pogba. But as a way of mitigation, I know in the EFL Cup final, one of our mates is in the coaching staff of the Southampton team, and they said their whole game plan was to just put pressure on Paul Pogba, was to give him no time on the ball whatsoever, because if Paul Pogba gets to play, then he hurts you. And they put 2 men to make sure Paul Pogba got no space. And I wonder how often that's happening, where opposition teams are looking at Manchester United and saying, stop that guy, stop him playing. And how many times they've been successful in that. Now, Paul Pogba's a good player, and he's a good player with a good brain, and he is going to overcome that with experience, but he's probably never had to deal with that at the likes of Juventus. And that's something he's having to overcome this season. And I think he is overcoming it. But I think people need to remember that that was what happened with Ronaldo. People would stop him, but we also had other players in the team that if he was stopped, Rooney would hurt you, or somebody else would hurt you. And at the moment, we don't have that other player that if Paul Pogba, especially in midfield, gets shut down, then there's no one else in the team that's going to just carry it.
Jay, what you think about Paul's performances this season?
I think the trouble we've got with Pogba is everything seems to be the extreme with him. He plays well against a team like Southampton. You know, you mentioned Southampton twice, the League Cup final, and earlier on in the season. I'm not being funny, they're not that great a side. I think they're about 13th in the league or whatever. And people say, oh, he's amazing. He has a fairly average game. And people say, he's a flop. You know, it's all extremes. He doesn't seem to get anyone where I think people will say he did okay or it was a fairly good game. It's either a disaster or he's the best player in the world. I think you've got 2 sort of polarising opinions. Mine's somewhere in the middle. I think he should have been better. His finishing has let him down. I think he's cost us points with some of his finishing. I agree with what you're saying about other players should have finished some of the chances he's created. But I actually think the £89 million thing is a bit of it's done him a favour almost, because he seems to get played and stay on the pitch when he should be subbed, he should be dropped. I think you look at someone like Lingard, who cost us nothing. The amount of stick Jesse Lingard gets, when actually when he comes in a lot of the time he does a job, it's a bit of a joke. And yet with Pogba, people say, oh, just because he cost £89 million, he gets all this grief. I don't think he does. I think he gets grief because sometimes he goes missing. And not being funny, it's not about whether you cost £89 million. It's the fact if you play for United, you have to turn up in some of the big games. You can't just go missing in all of them. And he hasn't done that enough for me. It doesn't matter whether he cost nothing or whether we paid how much we paid for him. If you're going to play for United, you have to turn up against the Chelseas, the Arsenals, the Cities. You can't just do it against Hull and Luhansk. You have to do it week in, week out, or at least some of the big games. And I know what you're saying, Halson, about Ronaldo used to get a lot of stick and similar things, but Ronaldo actually did turn up in some of the big games. People forget that, Champions League finals or games against Liverpool.
That was
City,
5 years into his United career.
Yeah, all right. And early on in his career, he turned up in some of the big games. Let's not forget, we're talking like 5 years into Pogba's career. He's not a kid. He's been around at Juventus. He's played in European Championship finals, Champions League finals. He's well into his career. So yeah, he's done okay. But I think the idea that he's been our best player of the season is a nonsense, if I'm honest.
Well, I think it's kind of a nonsense to say that £89 million price tag's done him a favour, because I think
in terms of getting him picked, because why else is he constantly on the pitch and never getting subbed, even when he's awful?
Well, Zlatan was
games where he's not been subbed.
Zlatan was a free transfer and he never gets subbed either.
Exactly, for the same reason, because he's a big signing. That's what I'm saying. If Jesse Lingard had some of the games that Paul Pogba is having, he gets pulled off straight away.
But
even
the other
does or Herrera.
The other thing is Lingard does have games where he goes missing all the time. Like, it's not.
Taken off and he gets subbed.
He's definitely missed chances, but the reason that we didn't beat Bournemouth was because of profligate finishing. That's why we didn't beat Bournemouth. The reason we didn't beat West Brom was because we didn't make enough good chances, which are two very different cause and effects. I'm arguing that it's not ridiculous. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I kind of passionately believe he's definitely been our player of the season, because actually I don't think there's any candidate who I could passionately argue for in this debate. I mean, Valencia would be my number one pick, but it's a kind of grudging pick because you want someone who's done at least something kind of.
After Jay's just your Pogba selection, you cannot defend Valencia. Paul.
I'm not.
You can't do it.
I'm saying he's my pick in spite of everything, in spite of the fact that he's he's barely had one spectacular game all season. You can't say that about Pogba. And the 89 easily the biggest knock for me against Paul Pogba's season was his performance against Liverpool at Old Trafford. That performance was the moment when we wouldn't even be having a debate about whether he was our player of the season or not if he turned up in that game. Because if he turned up in that game, there'd have been a lot of games subsequently which he turned up in too. That was the game after the hashtag got introduced, which was appalling timing from the marketing people, because here's the guy who's supposed to carry the weight of United on his shoulders, who clearly cares more about his own performance than some of his teammates. Like, the amount of pressure Pogba puts on himself is astronomical, and that's why I think the £89 million thing has been much more of a curse than a blessing for Pogba in terms of his performances this season. But he didn't turn up in that Liverpool game, and that was the moment where you were like, he's not quite there yet. But I think on balance, there have been enough good performances. I agree with you, Jay. Like, he does get a little bit polarized in terms of the discussion around him. He's either brilliant or terrible. But whilst that is partly just 21st century fandom, it is also because there is an aspect to which Paul Pogba's either brilliant or terrible. Those are kind of his two settings.
One thing I will say for Pogba, one thing in his defence, he gets United. I think he does. I think he cares. You can tell he cares. He cares. You can see when he's having a bad game. He's his own worst critic. I've seen him when Lingard was having a shocker in the derby. Pogba ran over to him, put his arm around him, had a little word in his ear. Come on. He was trying to G everyone up. All right, his own performance wasn't great, but he was at least, you can see he gives a toss. Where other players, their head drops and they don't want to know. So I do get that, and I agree with what Houseman said. Next season I think he's going to kick on. He's going to be a lot better than he has this season, and if we can start seeing that level of consistency, I think this time next season we'll all be arguing about who can pick Paul Pogba as the player of the season.
This time next season we will be champions.
Paul Pogba next season, because I defended him That's
right then.
Can't claim some at 12-month out. That's not how shotgun works.
Right, before we go into House's choice, I do think Pogba is in our top 4 players of the year. I definitely do, and I definitely think there was a period, that kind of period that Paul talks about, where so many of the clear-cut chances that he had created had been missed. And if those had been taken in the games, it would have been like, United won 1 or 2-0 again, Paul Pogba set up another goal. United won 1-0 again, Paul Pogba set up the winner. And it would have been that every single game for a good run of games, but it just didn't happen, unfortunately. Now, we spent about 30 minutes on Paul Pogba. So moving on, Harrison, we're going to spend another 30 minutes here now. Shit. All right, I'm putting my feet up. Go on, Steve.
I'm going to basically just award this today. I'm going to take the power out of your hands because when I was asked who do I want to pick, I said Tony Valencia
I feel
or
bad
Zlatan.
now because everyone's sort of
And he
saying,
said Tony Valencia's gone. I said, well, it's Zlatan then, innit?
No, you have to argue now. Come
Well,
on.
the man who I have an agenda against, obviously. I think Zlatan has been far and away Manchester United's highest level performer. Some of the goals that he scored have been fantastic. The output of goals, we haven't seen something like that since Ruud van Nistelrooy and Ronaldo and players, or even Wayne Rooney as well, who have also got an agenda against putting in that number of goals. He's going to finish the season, I think, with 30 plus goals, which is a phenomenal achievement for him when he's supposed to play over the hill, only scores against Farmers and all the rest of it. He's come to a misfiring Manchester United team and he's led from the front. When you talk about Paul Pogba getting United, it feels like Zlatan gets United. He should have been here 5, 6, 7 years ago, shouldn't he? Can you imagine what he'd have won, what we'd have won with him at the front of the team? He's been the guy that's been there. And now, he's not without fault himself, and I think that's probably why it is ultimately going to end up being Valencia, because Zlatan has missed a hell of a lot of chances. His completion rate something like 15%, but that still puts him as the most consistently outputting player in the United team, which just shows how long and how far Manchester United have got to go before we're back at the top level. But for me, it's got to be Zlatan. He's come in, he's completely changed up some things that we were missing over the last couple of years. He's become that focal point of the team. He's a leader in the dressing room. He's scoring the goals, and he's Zlatan Ibrahimovic, man.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, you just got to love Zlatan, haven't you? He's got that aura about him. A lot of other fans tend to hate him, which I love. He's got that physicality. You know, we've missed a bit of that. We're talking, again, how it's going to be in the season. You're talking about United getting that nastiness, getting a team full of bastards again. And he's one of them. You know, we've seen it, and he can really rile the opposition and rile the opposition fans and defenders. And yeah, I get what you mean. Some of his finishing has let him down. He seems to he'll score a difficult chance and seems to miss a sitter. And he has missed a lot of chances. But when he's out of the team, you see how much we miss him. He's like that focal point, you know, crosses, no one's at the end of crosses at all. At least he gets on the end of crosses. Even defensively, when he's back there, he does his job at set pieces. He has an aura about him, and he's an amazing player. And like you, I wish we'd have got him 5 or 6 years ago, because even though his fitness seems quite good, he's not quite sort of the level as he was. But I think he's been a big surprise, because I thought he'd struggle. I generally thought this could be hit or miss. I thought we'd be lucky if we get sort of 15 goals out of him this season. Use him sparingly, it'll be great. But he's played every game. Like you say, he's heading towards 30 goals a season. Yes, he's got his flaws, but you know, he's just a United player. He's just a sort of player that's destined that he had to come here sooner or later. He's got the touch of I'm not saying he's as good, but he's got the touch of the Eric Cantona has about him. That sort of, you know, mystique, that sort of attitude, that sort of, this is my ground, I belong here, these are my fans. And it's great to see. And I think when Zlatan's on the pitch, you've always got that sort of puncher's chance of a knockout. You know, I think it was against Liverpool where he was pretty poor and he pops up with a last-minute equaliser. He's one of those players that, going back to the Pogba thing about always leaving him on the pitch, I think with Zlatan, you have to leave him on the pitch, because even when he's playing poorly, he can always pop up with a goal. So, yeah, I get what you're saying. He's had too many poor games or missed too many chances to be the player of the season, but I can see why you could argue he's at least one of them.
Same like Pogba, though, isn't it? That if he's not been completely firing, then there's not really anybody else in the team that's going to pick up that goal-scoring mantle. So you've got Pogba doing it in midfield, you've got Zlatan doing it up front, but they're isolated doing that.
And
there's
like
not enough doing it around them.
No one else like in the team apart from Valencia. You'd say Valencia, Herrera, Pogba, Zlatan. No one else has really had a big purple patch. Like, you know, Mkhitaryan, he's had times where he's come in and he's played great.
Yeah, he's not had anything like this.
But we've never had. I know Matt has done consistently well throughout the season, and I'm surprised one of you haven't picked him, considering he's our second highest goal scorer, the only other player to get to double figures. Paul, what are your feelings on Zlatan?
Yes, it's kind of crazy that we're having a conversation where it's almost like Zlatan was a reluctant pick. Like Zlatan Ibrahimovic got outpicked by Tony Valencia. What world are we living in?
We all just appreciate Tony Valencia. I think that's what we're getting here.
there's been all these incredible Zlatan moments. The pure, unadulterated Zlatan-ness of him scoring the winner in the League Cup final. I think back to it's a sunny day today here where I am, and I think back to a lovely sunny day in August 2016 when he lashed one in from miles out against Bournemouth and went over to the away fans. And it was just he just announced himself, and we were ready for the season of Zlatan, and we've kind of got it. You remember when Homer Simpson says alcohol, the cause of and solution to all life's problems?
All of our problems.
This is Zlatan Ibrahimovic's relationship with Manchester United. He is the cause of and solution to most of the problems we've had this season. It's a very strange mix because, you know...
Absolutely.
Can I just say, Paul, you win.
Yeah.
Full-time Devils Pundit of the Year.
Thank you.
Homer Simpson reference is a print one. I mean, we've not even thrown pizza into the mix.
The thing about that is, you know, he's been easily our most frustrating player to watch this season, easily, but also the most magnificent. And, it's been amazing to have him. And the kind of, the pain that's come with the chances he's missed, and the games where, frankly, he hasn't been able to engage maximum Zlatan-ness because there's not enough at stake. That has been frustrating, but it's also he's just been vital to the squad. The leadership is obvious, the way players look up to him. I was in the mix zone after the cup final, and Chris Smalling just said he's our main man, and that's so evidently the case in a team which actually does have quite a lot of potential main men. He's by far and away the main man, and if he could have hit 10% better, there'd be no debate whatsoever. It'd be Zlatan Player of the Year for sure. But there's just been too much where it's gone wrong at the last minute.
He could go on a run from now to the end of the season though, and put us over the line into the top 4 and absolutely steal it without beyond a shadow of a doubt. If he just, do you remember Eric Cantona at 97? He scored 6 or 7 1-0 victories with Cantona 80 odd minutes. 96? Yeah. And just completely wiped the floor with everything. Zlatan has got the potential to mimic Eric, not only in the way his demeanour is, and not only in the way he can transform some attitudes about the club, but he can also go and mimic what he did by stealing Player of the Year.
Do you remember the celebration at Newcastle where he just screamed into the sky?
Yeah, and that was March.
I love that celebration. It makes the hair stand. Sorry.
That was March '96, and we played 4 games in March '96, won 1-0 3 times, and drew 1-1 the time we didn't. And Cantona scored all those goals. We also won the cup final 1-0, and he scored that too. And it's like you say, if Zlatan has an April of 2017 to match Cantona's March of 1996, then Tony Valencia, I'm sorry, you have to go home.
Yes,
because it's
whoa. Problem is Cantona had 4 games and Zlatan's got
150. And that is such a good point, because I think so much of what's been wrong this season with Zlatan has been a lack of rotation. If he'd played 20% less minutes, I'm sure we would have got at least 5% better overall performance. So that's on Mourinho. But anyway.
Right then. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, guys.
Big decision here then, yeah.
I have got a big decision. What I want you to do, though, is you can give me a sentence each on why your choice is the choice. We'll go the order that we started with. So Jay first.
Best of a bad bunch.
Inspired that, Jay.
Yeah,
cheers.
I'm with him.
Can't wait to hear that the Player of the Year award.
Well, listen, Howson and Paul have slated my choice, but then said, "But ours aren't any better." It's the best we can come up with, really, because no one's really been that great. So I think the only defence I can say is that he's been consistent when no one else has.
Go on, Paul.
Yeah, my sentence for my choice is he's been consistent when no one else has. He's the best right back we've got in the squad. He's Ecuadorian. That's...
Wait, what?
have I just done Inception situation? Yeah, it's obviously Antonio Valencia. Obviously.
What?
I mean,
there you go.
He doesn't understand what debate means.
Pogba's out of the running. Go on.
It's got to be Zlatan, because let's face it, no one wants consistent alrightness to be winning stuff. You've got to win stuff by winning stuff, and football games are won by scoring goals, and Zlatan's done that more than anybody else in a United shirt this season. So give it Valencia.
I feel like a fraud here, Seriously, I feel like it's been handed.
So
Too easy.
we look at Valencia, and Valencia has been consistently Valencia throughout the season. He's been fantastic, and
Couple of player of the
he's
month
been
awards as
performing
well.
great. So has Zlatan though. Bailey had about 4 at the beginning of the season. He hasn't been mentioned in this debate, probably because he went away for the Ivory Coast and then he got injured and all that stuff. But I'm surprised he didn't keep. If he kept his form going throughout the season, he would have been a definite shout as well. Ander Herrera didn't get mentioned today. I am shocked at that.
I mentioned him earlier, Adam.
But you mentioned him as Paul Pogba's partner. And
No. I
nomination.
mentioned him as my other potential choice because he was. I was like 50-50.
What,
Yeah,
Paul?
Herrera
He wasn't
was
your
my
choice,
choice,
Paul.
to be fair.
Yeah.
No, lads. It wasn't. You didn't pick him. So I don't want to hear about ifs and buts and maybes. You didn't pick him. If Zlatan had put away all of Paul Pogba's assists, Paul Pogba would have been player of the year, but he's not.
Mate, we'd have been looking at a treble by now if he'd have done that.
What, 3 home wins?
Yeah, man.
Right. So I've made my decision, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with this guy here.
What? That's a complete stitch up, and you
No,
know.
listen.
Hey,
I started this by
little bit,
saying,
yeah.
I hate him.
So
I
before
started this
it
by
was
saying
Valencia was winning.
Valencia's won, but
And I've
I
convinced
cannot
you
get
otherwise.
around. I cannot get around the fact Zlatan Ibrahimovic, his performance at Wembley to win us the final. You look at that goal, the winning goal,
Against
where he was
Southampton.
involved at the
Come
back
on, let's
stick.
get a bit of perspective. here.
What about the fact that we're 6th in the league because we draw every home game because Zlatan keeps missing chances in the
I know.
6-yard box?
Paul,
with fifth.
Sorry.
Sort your neck out.
Paul, you had your chance to do this
Hey,
earlier.
What about all them cities?
It's clear you've got an agenda against Zlatan, and I will have
Literally one
none.
of my favourite humans.
I will have none of this Zlatan slander. So listen,
Wait, above Emma Bunton or below Emma Bunton?
listen. The only reason,
I didn't know the answer to this.
What?
Is he above Emma Bunton or below? Who doesn't like Emma Bunton?
I don't.
What? Emma Bunton? You're
Yeah.
not, yeah, she's a knobhead.
She's the best out of the Spice
Mal
Girls.
B was, which was the best.
And now there's a huge
Something
debate
about
we
it.
could get
She's a
behind.
freak. The huge
Next
Spice
up on
Girls
Full Time
debate.
Devils, who was your favourite Spice Girl?
Get your comments
Not
in
the
the
Scouse
No
one.
one, nobody say the Scouser.
Which one's that?
The Scouse one.
Scouse Spice.
Yeah, anyway, moving on. Right, so the decision was Zlatan simply because he scored more goals than anyone else. He has.
Oh,
he has
that's a logical
almost-
argument there, isn't it? He scored more goals.
You can't. I'm not
what,
giving
he's
it to a
5 years
defender.
Scored more goals than he's the best player.
Okay, let me ask you this. Also, Jay, also, listen. Jay, listen.
Yeah.
Also, Jay, listen.
Jay,
Where
please
would
dummy
we have
up.
been without Zlatan?
Where would it be without Tony V? Without Tony V, we'd be 6th.
We'd be in the same place without Tony V. This is the point.
We'd barely be
Tony
6th.
V can't cross his legs.
You've got
Tony V is amazing, but he cannot do it in the attack. And for me, Zlatan deserves it because he's won us a trophy. He has scored the most goals, and he's been Zlatan.
Listen, he's won us the League Cup when he scored
And
the most
also
goals.
a big thing about Zlatan, but that's all we've done this season.
Yeah, to be fair, yeah,
And to be fair, yeah, Zlatan has also been responsible for
Massive
me
agenda.
in the massive mentality shift at Manchester United this season. I feel there's been a big shift in mentality, and I feel like Jose Mourinho has started to rid some of the cobwebs of the last 2 or 3 years that have been at Manchester United. It hasn't been perfect, it hasn't been great, nor has Zlatan Ibrahimovic. But I feel he's responsible for a lot of these players kind of taking on some extra responsibility, getting their acts together a little bit, and he has kind of galvanised the whole place. He galvanised the fans as well, just like Jose Mourinho did. And I think for that reason alone, Zlatan Ibrahimovic wins it. Jay, shut up.
Honestly, McCullough, right? I had so much time for you before this. You know what I mean? You know,
I'm devastated, Jay.
Just for the boys, isn't it? Seriously.
You had got my nomination for him.
There you go. I owe you one, Macca. Yeah, next time round I'll sort you out. Don't worry, son.
How seriously does Jay take debates?
Listen,
I love it. I just want to keep.
disappointed.
He's been the only person to have an argument with Paul ever.
which is outrageous.
That was a good argument, to be fair. I think he might have been right.
I hate anyone that hates arguing with Paul. You can't argue with Paul. It's just not right, to be fair.
We need to get you on fan cams, Jay. We might get like 1 million views or
God,
something.
yeah. I'm gonna get 1 million death threats.
Anyway, guys,
You can't come and do fan
you
cams at
can
games.
hit that I button. Where is it? Is it above his head? It's above my head. Hit that I button and vote. You can vote for Valencia, Zlatan. Who's the other one?
Pogba.
Pogba.
So,
I almost felt like I was.
Even though he's been nominated.
But vote.
But how was
vote
Pereira not
He
nominated?
had a piece of paper with Zlatan wrote on it.
Pereira's probably having the best
You don't
year.
even care. You don't even care who's been nominated. Hey, seriously.
I had an envelope with a
This is
name
a
on it
disgrace.
of the person who's gonna let me down, and it was your name, Jay. Your name. Right. Guys, get your votes in for Player of the Year. FTDs, it means a lot. Here's been Jay from Red Flag Flying High, the Manchester correspondent of the year. Paul has been Paul from United Rantcast and Bleacher Report. He's been Stephen Arson from where are you from?
Yeah.
Yeah, from here. And I've been Adam.
I've been robbed is what I've been.